Right. I hope you're all sitting ready for our next session. So we're going to begin with talking about some industry insights. How is the role of the human translator changing as technology evolves? What are the pitfalls of machine translation? Well, we've been hearing lots about that. With speech to text, and how can quality, again, a theme that's been running throughout this conference, how can quality be ensured? And these are just some of the questions that are going to be considered in the next session, chaired by Yota Georgakopoulou from the Athena Consultancy and a member of the Lind Expert Group. So welcome, Yota, and to all your panelists. Yota, I've got a question for you. Technology is rapidly evolving, as is the sheer volume of work, but how user-friendly is it?
Hello, Anya. Thank you for the question, and it's my pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, the volume of content is really exploding, and it doesn't seem to be reaching a plateau yet, from what I can tell. And this is exactly what I'll be talking about with my panelists today. I'm very excited to be physically back at TEF with all of you. Thank you very much. And to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the use of language technologies such as speech recognition and machine translation in video localization work specifically. And I'm joined by 4 distinguished guests that represent 4 different sectors, 4 different parts of the sector that I work with, and I've known them all for years. I hadn't seen them until this year, so it's a real pleasure to see you all guys. I will introduce them first. So to the left, we have Dr. Anna Zaretskaya, who is the Machine Translation Strategy Director at Transperfect, and is here to represent the point of view of a large language service provider. Anna has a PhD in translation technologies, and she has been designing and leading the implementation of machine translation at Transperfect, where she's been for the past 6 years. She's working closely with the company's engineers and designing training programs for post-editors. Next to her, we have Associate Professor Jan Pedersen, who is the Director of the Institute for Interpreting and Translation Studies at Stockholm University. He has been researching and teaching audiovisual translation for many years. He used to work as a television subtitler as well, back in the day. He is the author of the book Subtitling Norms for Television. He has published extensively on audiovisual translation, various topics, and lately he's been researching the effect of machine translation in subtitling workflows, and he will share his insights with us. Then we have Dr. Stavroula Sokoli, who wears many hats. She has a PhD in subtitling as well. She's a university lecturer. She's working as a researcher in audiovisual translation at the Computer Technology Institute and Press Diophantus in Greece. She's also a practitioner working as a freelance translator and subtitler. She's the language lead for the Greek language at Delax, one of the largest audiovisual translation providers. She's the vice president of EASIST on the board of the Hellenic Society of Translation Studies. But today we will ask her to put on her hat of a subtitler and member of the various translator associations that she participates in, so she can share the point of view of translators on the topics that we will discuss. And last but not least, we have Dr. Volker Steinbiss. He's representing the language technology developers. Volker is the managing director of AppTek in Germany, where the bulk of the company's research team is based because of the close links with the Human Language Technologies Department of RWTH Aachen University, which is quite famous for its work in its field. Volker has a PhD in mathematics. He's been working with language technologies all of his life, starting with speech recognition at Philips Research back in the 90s. He then worked with statistical machine translation, more recently with neural machine translation, of course, and also lately with speech-to-speech translation, which is translation from audio in one language straight to audio in another language. And he's here to tell us all about the latest developments in the research arena. Now, in the sector of video localization or media localization, as we like to call it, the use of language technologies is a lot more recent. And machine translation specifically has been implemented in this sector for the past 2 to 3 years. And we've had a chance to see how things have gone in this time to reach some initial conclusions. Speech recognition has been used a lot longer, primarily in live subtitling workflows to produce live subtitles and captions. But recently it's also used when you're producing offline, pre-recorded work to create a final draft for a subtitle file that's post-edited by subtitlers. With the increase that we are noticing in the volume of content that needs to be localized, there's more of a push to use these technologies to achieve faster time to market, and in some cases also to reduce costs. I think it's a good time to take stock and discuss what we've been noticing, what we've been seeing, and where we stand. I would like to start with a more general question for all of you, so you can tell us, each of you, about your own personal experience with these technologies. Perhaps if you want to make a statement on them from the, as a representative of the field that you each are here to talk on behalf of, like language service provider, academia, freelance translator, or technology vendor. And I think I'll start with Volker, who can tell us where do we stand in speech recognition and machine translation from a scientific point of view to begin with.
Well, I think the general statement should be it's getting better all the time. So let's talk about speech recognition. I would say it's not human professional performance, maybe in some very specific cases, but generally not, very clearly. You can just try it out when you use your smartphone, and then you see where we stand approximately. It's already better than, I would say, second language speakers. So at least our system in US English is better than I am in US English, and I've been listening to that language for decades. So that's already quite impressive. So much about the performance. The difficulty or the performance as such depends very much on the domain and on the acoustic conditions. So, for example, when you have one person talking very distinctively like a professional speaker or a talking head in a documentary or so, it's already pretty good. If it's several people talking across each other in a heated discussion, so that won't work that well at the moment. So now coming to machine translation, a few years ago it was clearly visible when a sentence had been translated automatically. So it was okayish, but it was not great. And then by the introduction of deep neural networks, it became so much better. Say they are also helpful in automatic speech recognition, but in MT, that made quite a difference. In particular for language pairs where the word order differs, right? So that is much better, and the fluency is much better. So I would say that's where we stand. Over 2 years, you see significant improvements. Over like 2 or 3 months, it's nothing visible. And I don't say, we go towards human performance, because I believe there is no natural boundary. So it will always be worse in some respects, but in others, it's already better. It's already superhuman. For example, nobody here probably can speak 100 languages or can write down a number sequence like 491796679918 or something longer. So you have to be aware this is getting better all the time. And, we are where we stand, and we try to work on it.
Thank you very much. And indeed, machine translation has got a lot better, and this is the reason why it has been implemented in creative sectors such as subtitling. It didn't happen with statistical, but with neural machine translation, it got to a level that it could offer some benefit. So I would like to ask Anna next, how much of these technologies are actually integrated in your production workflows at TransPerfect? What extent do you use speech recognition and machine translation in your work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. It's my first time. So, right. So at TransPerfect, we have a big media localization group, right? and we have tools supporting this production team. So we have a very complete suite of tools for media. So it includes a tool for clients to place an order with us, and a media library, and of course an environment for subtitlers and translators, where they can see the video and they can edit the subtitles and do transcription and translate or do post-editing. And so, of course, we have integrated ASR and machine translation in our workflows. So, of course, ASR has reached unprecedented quality levels. So it would be strange not to use it. It really increases efficiency of the transcribers. But of course, not always, right? There are different production complexities sometimes that prevent us from using it. You have, sometimes we have a client who would say, well, can't you use ASR here just to transcribe faster? And it's a video with different overlapping speakers, speaking in different languages. Maybe there is a voiceover, and you cannot separate the audio tracks really. And so this kind of things, just prevent us from using it, this kind of technology sometimes. So it's not that it's a default way of doing transcription. And then in terms of machine translation, again, we do use it. We create our machine translation systems in-house. Of course, we can also use others. So you already met my colleague Fred, who leads the development of these systems. And so the way it works is a translator or a post-editor opens a file in their translation environment, and they have already the machine translation suggestions. Again, here, it doesn't mean that we always use machine translation. It's our default way of working. No, we do use it frequently, but mostly when it makes sense and when it actually helps. And then one more type of technologies that we didn't mention actually is the speech synthesis, right? It's it's becoming a very important technology and a very important tool, especially for auto dubbing, right? And we have a group at TransPerfect who creates speech synthesis systems or voice morphing. So what it is, so imagine you have a dubbing actor who comes into the studio and they record something, but then something changes in the source, or there is a sentence missing or something. And it's very expensive to get this actor come to the studio again. So this technology allows you to record something with a different person and then mimic the voice of the original actor. And of course, it really helps with the efficiency, right? You also, it also can work as a text-to-speech. And basically, it helps also make the voice more natural, add emotions, and so on and so on. So this is also very interesting. And yeah, as I said, we have a group at TransPerfect working on that as well. But that's mostly for dubbing rather than subtitling, of course. So yeah, that's basically the overview.
Thank you very much. I wasn't aware you were already using voice cloning. This is one of the hot topics right now that people are very much looking into indeed. I would like to ask Stavroula next, from the point of view of translators. What do you think of the use of speech recognition and machine translation in video localization? What do you hear from other subtitlers as well?
Yeah. It's before I answer that, can I say that it's just wonderful for me to be here. I'm a big fan of TEF, and I've been watching it for years now, and it's like being in my favorite show, like being part of it. So it's cool. It seems that we need to say a statement. I'm for machine translation. I'm against machine translation, like being one side or the other. But it's not necessarily like that. It seems like subtitlers are all against machine translation, that we should never use it. It kills our creativity. We work more for less, and we have to get a lower quality of work in the end. It's the answer is it depends where you use it, not only for what kind of material you use it, but also in the process where exactly it's used, the technology. If you use ASR in the beginning to create a transcript, is very helpful. How can you say that I'm against that? It really speeds up the process, and you need to have a human post-editor depending on the quality of the original content. So you not only have feature films and series, you have telenovelas and reality shows talking about the entertainment industry. And then you have European Parliament speeches, and you have lectures that is a completely different kind of audiovisual text with different needs. So it all depends where you use it, how you use it. You've talked about that for 3 days now, so I'm not going to say more about it. But when there is, talking about the process, when an error appears in a specific point in this process, then it can easily propagate into many, many languages. So we can talk about examples later on, but this is like my first statement on the subject.
I hear you talking a little bit about content profiling in a way, just like Anna did. You know, there's types of content you can use it for, where it works better, and places where it doesn't. Over to Jan. What does the academia think about the use of these technologies, and is there any, what research is there going on?
Oh, so now I catalog all the research going on at all the universities in this area. Well, I'm also very glad to be here, and it's sort of funny that I'm the token academic here in a panel that consists of people who all have PhDs, I must say. But from the university point of view, I think that a lot of the systems actually come out of academia. We cooperate a lot with companies, and we also develop our own systems. For instance, I'm involved with a speech-to-text reporting system using ASR for students who are deaf and hard of hearing and so on. So we do a lot of that. But as with all people, there are technophiles and technophobes in academia, so people have very different views. And but I think that ASR is more accepted than machine translation because it has been around for longer. Whereas for subtitling, a machine translation is still viewed with some skepticism. But that's always the case when something comes in that's new, isn't it? The people that have developed it think that it's going to solve all the problems and everything will be all right and everything will be much cheaper. And the people who have to use them feel that they are getting violated, really. So after a while, it sort of settles down, and the new innovation, whatever it may be, sort of gets to be in its right place and be used for what it's useful for. And of course, some things need to have higher quality translation than others, but I think, and I've always thought that, even when I was a subtitler, that reducing telenovelas and that sort of thing to, you don't need to have such high quality on translation for that. I translated telenovelas before I got onto the bigger jobs, and the reason why I was given that was that I was a rookie, and it really doesn't matter, so that translated into poor quality as well. But isn't that really elitism, saying that people who watch television in the daytime or that sort of content, everybody can't be an Ingmar Bergman fan or something like that, right? So, their tastes should be respected just as everyone else, I think.
Thank you, Jan. I would like to go back to Anna to talk about the implementation. And the first thing that you think about when you think about implementation is change management. What is actually happening to the role of the subtitler and the translator, and how is it changing? How are everyone kind of mentioned that this affects people's working conditions. So how does it affect it?
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. I can talk a lot about it. Basically because when I joined TransPerfect, we used very little machine translation, and quickly my role became this change management role, right? So there was quite a bit of resistance from all the parties involved, not just the freelance translators, also our internal translators. Our colleagues didn't really understand why do we need to use machine translation now, and so on. And so it required a lot of creating documentation, organizing training, creating training classes or live trainings. And often I had to just get on a call with a translator and answer all their questions and address all their concerns. And I was doing it every day, basically all day. And so now more than half of all our translations use machine translation, both for media and normal written content. And so when it comes to freelance translators, just like Stavroula said, there is no yes and no from that I hear from our translators. It's a yes when it works, right? And so for media specifically, this initiative is more recent than just implementing machine translation in general in the company. So we often conduct surveys for our translators or subtitlers to understand if machine translation is helpful, how do they feel about it, and so on. So for example, in the recent one, we asked our German subtitlers who work on a very specific project. It's not entertainment, it's technical training videos. So we asked them how helpful they think machine translation is and whether or not they want it removed from the project. And 60% of them answered that they want to continue working with MT, and 27% said that they want it removed, right? But mostly, again, it's yes or no. It's yes, I want it, but this and that. Certain conditions have to be met, right? Mostly, we do see that machine translation increases efficiency and helps even with quality sometimes. But again, not always. And the conditions, I think there are three main conditions. First, of course, the machine translation quality has to be good. It's pretty obvious, but if it's good, it's helpful. If it's not good, it's not helpful. Then second is the content. So we said a little bit about content profiling. Indeed, not every content is suitable for ASR or MT, and we don't want to have this, blanket approach. Okay, we're using machine translation on everything starting tomorrow.
More money to do that. So it takes money and time. As your favorite quote is, the favorite song, as in any other kind of translation, I suppose. So there's also this idea of using machine translation in an intermediate part of the process. So this other example was that in a recent task I was asked to be involved in, there was this Greek series, telenovela, which you think should have quality subtitles as well. But they say this is a low-budget thing, so we want low-budget subtitles. So what they did, they wanted into Hebrew. Don't ask me why people in Israel want to watch a telenovela with 250 episodes in one season. You can imagine the amount. It's a daily one. That's why they had the 251 episodes. So they started by the script that was available for the HDH subtitles. Then they machine translated it into English to create an intermediate template, which would then be used by human translators to translate it from English into Hebrew. And they asked me if the machine translation was good enough for the human translator into. So we're talking about pivot translation now. And I said, okay, it's quite good when it's good. You can use it as a source text. But when it's bad, it's really, really bad. It doesn't make any sense. So it has to be human edited. Of course, we don't worry about punctuation errors or really the style or the fluency. We want a verbatim thing that can be used then in translation. So I wasn't involved in the actual work because I said, I'm not interested in this kind of work. I don't like it. I don't like to correct post-edited machine-translated subtitles that are going to use as a template for the translation. It's not interesting for me, so I suggested that some students would do that. I am worried that the end quality is not going to be very good, but if they tell you, there's very low budget for it, what can you do? So it's a matter of content owners being more aware of the need for quality and pressing towards that.
I would say it was probably super helpful that you showed up they showed up in the social media, right? Because when people start talking about these things and suddenly realizing there is something like translation or subtitles or so, rather than being in the shadows and not being seen. I think even bad news is good because
absolutely. And some streaming platforms like Netflix, they are very, very careful about. They take it into consideration and they actually ask for a new subtitle. It happened with Roma. It happened with other films. They asked for a new subtitle file with Squid Game. All the rage, all that it was under standard subtitles, and it was because it was considered low budget. So they didn't expect Squid Game to have such a high acceptance by the audience, to be so popular. So what they did, they have different tiers. So they said, we'll spend less money on this. And then it became so popular, people started talking about it in social media, pinpointing the errors, and then they went back and redid the whole thing. So where is the cost effectiveness in that? So if you talk about the triangle of cost, quality, and final, and the deadlines, the time being saved, in the end, it might not be as cost effective or as time effective as you thought.
Although in that case, perhaps if originally they didn't have much budget and then they got a lot more budget, maybe, I don't know. Let's ask the audience. I wanted to ask the audience how they feel about using a machine translation. So if we have any translators that use machine translation for video localization work here or online, can we start the first poll about whether you use MT and how do you find it affects your work? I would be really interested to see what people say. And while people are voting, perhaps I can ask the next question to Jan already about your research, that you did some comparative research on machine translation post-editing versus subtitling from scratch. And can you tell us basically what your findings were?
Yeah, sure. It's me and a PhD student of mine, Hanna Hagström, who carried out a comparative study of subtitles that were produced with and without machine translation. And I need to correct you, I think, Yota, because we didn't compare it to subtitles that were created from scratch, but who are template-based. Yeah, and there is a difference, of course, and that's, as you were saying, the more steps that are involved in the process, the more sources of errors you find. So if you have many steps in a process, then you're more likely to get errors than if you do it from scratch and one subtitler is in control of the whole process. So what we did was that we looked at data in TV. It was documentaries and these property programs and build me a new house and look at this weird thing I've got on my body and that sort of programs, because those are the ones that you normally, it's those low budget things, and that's where you find machine translation. So one big company said, now we're going to do machine translation that's post-edited, and we sampled stuff that was before that period and stuff that was after that period. And we did a quality analysis, and we also looked at if there are any specific traits the MTP, so subtitles, machine translated post-edit subtitles, from the ones that were created using only templates. And templates, of course, were involved in both processes. And they turned out to be rather different. The machine translated ones, machine translated and post-edited ones, they were much quicker, they were much more incomplete, and they contained 7 times as many errors as the ones that were produced without machine translation. And since we didn't look at the process, we only looked at the product, we don't know what caused these errors. It could be the machine, the software that was used. It could also be the post-editors who weren't properly trained. Because there were subtitlers, there were basically the same subtitlers that were responsible for the episodes that had been created before they started using machine translation and after. And we don't know how much training they got. They got some training, but we don't know how much. And how much was due to other things. But there's some really weird things going on in the machine translated subtitles that that doesn't with the ones that only use templates. And I think that habituation has a lot to do with it. We think that when you are served with, when a translation is given to you, that sort of limits your thinking immediately, and you would normally not use that. When we know, because I mean, there was the same people who had translated the other ones. They wouldn't use that phrasing. They wouldn't commit those errors if they did it with their own translation. So, and I think that what we need to do there is to make sure that machine translation is viewed for what it is. It's a tool. It's a very, very useful tool, but it's a tool. It's not sort of a universal solution to the translator talent crunch, or what you might want to call it. It's a tool, and it needs to be used by people wisely to do that and make people augmented translators.
Thank you, Jan. So what I hear you saying, and Stavroula, and actually heard it from others, that with machine translation post-editing, there is a risk perhaps of more errors being left in the file. So I would hope that what you described, that there is always a second person reviewing to ensure, the quality of the end product is not affected. Actually, I would like to ask this to Anna. What do you do? I assume you collect metrics in your work for your workflow. So what do you do to ensure the quality of the end product? Mm-hmm. How does machine translation affect it?
Yeah, I would actually add to what Jan said, and I can imagine how machine translation can limit your creativity, and you might produce a translation that's maybe more dry or like more straightforward. But if you're translating a non-creative video, like again, a technical video, it can actually help with the consistency of the terminology, right? You will always have all the terms correct, and you won't make so many terminology errors, right? Or you can save time on terminology research. So, it all depends, again, on where you use it and how you use it. But basically, going back to the quality of the final product, so in one of the panels yesterday, someone said that what is quality? The quality is what the client wants, right? And so our quality program is based on that. So of course, you wouldn't have the same quality requirement for a technical video and for children's animation video, right? And so our quality program is typically established together with the client, and we have a dedicated team for media translations quality who does that. And there are different metrics that they would use after agreeing with the client, but they include, for example, and we have typically client reviewers, right, who validate the translations that we deliver, and they typically work in the same tools that our translators and subtitlers work in, right? So they have, again, their glossary connected, they can see the video and so on. And so then we measure the typical metrics such as number of sentences or subtitles edited by the reviewers, the edit distance, and they also have the ability to mark the types of errors. So is it a terminology, is it a style error, and so on. And we have, dashboards where we have all the reporting, and the client and the quality team can see it and decide whether it's acceptable or not. And overall, we don't see more quality issues reported by clients when we use MT post-editing for videos, as opposed to when we use the traditional human process. So I think this is because of two things. One is that we already deliver quite good quality, even when doing machine translation post-editing. It's because, first of all, we have at least two translators working on the file. So we have a post-editor and a proofreader. And they both know, or at least when we are asked to deliver full post-editing, they know that the quality they need to deliver has to be very similar to what they would deliver with traditional human process. And the second reason really is that our clients would ask for post-editing, or we would recommend them to do post-editing only in certain scenarios where it's acceptable. So we wouldn't recommend them to do it for premium, very creative content, high visibility content, right? That's very strategically important to them. So there we just do human translation, and our clients know that, and this is what we recommend them. So again, that is why we wouldn't have so many quality issues with due to MT. So when it comes to ensuring quality, really, I think there are three things that I would mention. First is translators' working conditions. So the translators have to have enough time to perform their work correctly. They have to be compensated correctly, and they have to have all the tools available to them, right? Of course, second is the quality of machine translation itself. These things are kind of tied together, because if you have a low MT quality, you will spend a lot of time and you will just not be able to deliver on time with the quality that you required. And then the third is the feedback loop with the client. This is very important, and agreeing on what good translation is with the end client is essential. So that's why we have a dedicated quality team for that. And they're the ones who create the glossaries, they create the style guides and the instructions for the post editors. So this is all defined from the beginning.
Thank you very much. Can we display the results of the poll? If I remember while watching or people voting, it seems to be split half and half. So some people, it seems to be that a lot of people use machine translation, but it's split. You know, some people feel it makes them more productive, but more or less the same amount of people feel it doesn't make them more productive, and some clearly say it steers their thinking, it blocks their creativity, I assume, and just as many say it makes them work faster and easier, so they use it all the time. So these metrics seem to be improved to last year when I asked a similar poll at a different conference. But on the question, you said that, I don't know if you want to have a comment on this, but my question to you is, because you said the quality of the end product is the same, and you do use a proofreader, so second pair of eyes. I wonder if at that proofreading review process, the errors that these people pick up when a file has been post-edited are different to when it was translated without machine.
I don't have an answer to that, but that's an excellent topic for research, actually. So yeah, that would be good to look into it. With the clients who give their permission.
For the online audience, sorry. My question is, and I'm putting you right in the spotlight, because I feel there is so much need for collaboration between the LSPs and the researchers.
Yeah, I know.
And the researchers are trying to do their best with the limited material they have, the little data, no resources. So if we're so jealous of all the data you have and the resources, but it's all confidential and we can't use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a big topic in machine translation as well, right? Because the researchers want our data, we cannot give it to them, but we don't have time to perform research, and it's like a chicken and egg problem. But I just want to quickly comment on the poll. I'm wondering about the second option. I use MT sometimes as an aid, but it doesn't make me faster. So what does it help with if it's not the productivity?
Maybe alternative translations or so?
If I can chip in on that, I always thought that if I used machine translation, it would be very good for consistency. But it depends on what kind of engine you use. If you use a generic engine, like in my case, because I don't choose the engine, then you have very different translations for the same word throughout the file. And it was a big surprise for me. But it was actually not bad, because some of them made me think differently and actually get in, with a very different creative solution in the end. But this is not time effective, and it does not save me time, and it does not make me work faster, but it might spark my imagination to use something different. And it's an exception, it's not the norm.
That basically means that you use machine translation as a thesaurus.
Absolutely, absolutely, as a tool. And it really doesn't make me faster yet, because as I said, I might do mistakes that I wouldn't have done, so I spend more time in the reviewing process. I'm more aware of the fact that I have done more errors, so I have to be more careful and more attentive.
No, the geek is speaking. I mean, given how it's being realized, the neural machine translation, there is no reason why it should be consistent. So if you strive for consistency, you have to tell the researchers, either in academia or in the companies, that you say that's important. We want to have it consistent, or, you have to work with the glossaries or so, because otherwise, these guys are just working and doing some fancy stuff or so, but they will never solve your problems if you don't articulate them. And, hammer with the fist on the table.
And it's not only, some LSPs are actually working with their own translation memories, sorry, not translation memories, their terminology databases, and they working on integrating them into the platforms they're using, which is going to be a big lifesaver for the subtitlers, because now we have to go back to a different tool, look at the terminology there, and then try to implement it in the platform. But when it's all integrated, it's going to save you time. So we really, really want this kind of technology, and it's not that we're against this. This is going to help with the quality and with the time.
Well, thank you all. I think it's very exciting, and there are questions from the floor and online, I assume, as well. So maybe we should spend the time to answer some questions. I see some hands up in the back. Maybe a microphone. Go. Yes, the person in grey, in the grey top, I suppose. No. Wait. Okay, if you could try to speak loudly, and I will repeat what I...
If that can help... Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. My name is Jean-François Cornu. I've been in the translation trade for more than 35 years, in subtitling, screenplay translation, and non-fiction book publishing. I would like to set a few things right here, because I've heard a few things which go contrary to my practice and to the practice of a great number of my colleagues here. First of all, I heard that automatic spotting in subtitling is appreciated by all translators. This is wrong. All the colleagues I have, including Iris Permouy next to me, hates it. And from personal experience, I've had to redo the spotting or the timing, whatever you call it, every time I've had an automatic spotting, because like translation, spotting, which means finding the right space for each subtitle before you do the translation, is better done by human beings. And the main goal of automation, whatever it is applied to, is to reduce costs and replace human beings. A very good example was given by the person representing Transperfect. When you mentioned the use of speech synthesis for dubbing, and you mentioned that it saved cost because you didn't have to ask for the dubbing actor to come back for one sentence. It was much easier than to, because it would cut costs. But the other thing is that you have to remember is that any time a translator or an actor uses or is being used with automatic tools, eventually it's going to be to replace that person. So, and one last thing, Roma. You mentioned the subtitling of Roma, a film by Alfonso Cuarón, which was actually, yes, streamed on Netflix a few years ago. The subtitling was terrible in any language because English was used as a pivot language. Indeed. The only reason why some of it was fixed was because the French Association of Translators, Audiovisual Translators, I'm a member of, actually highlighted a number of mistakes in the subtitles, but Netflix only fixed some of the mistakes, only the ones that we spotted, but there were many more, and they didn't redo the whole subtitling. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to launch the final poll for the audience so we can see what the audience thinks will happen with these technologies in the future. And can we actually take a question from the other person in grey, Carlos?
Before, can I, because I felt in the spotlight by Jean-Francois, right? I didn't say that it's appreciated by all the subtitlers, but by some subtitlers, and it also depending very much on the content. If you have a film that is beautifully created with beautiful photography and carefully crafted scene changes, then you really need the human to do not only for the quality of your translation, because it's going to be better if it's timed in a specific way for you to be able to provide a translation, but also to respect the choices of the director, of the creative team, of how they want to structure their work. And you have to be really careful of not spoiling that. This is a respect to the content and the creative team. And it's definitely there. The automation is not very good, but you have to consider that we're not only talking about the specific, maybe you're working mainly in that kind of high profile, creative, beautiful content, but it's not always possible to work in very, very high standards, and when your turnaround times are tomorrow, and sometimes, and then you might say, just tell your clients it's not possible. So if they don't find anybody to do it, then they might consider that we have to give more time in localization, and that is not an afterthought, and that it's taken care of right from the beginning, that the time allowed is proper. But these are the realities of the industry, which we don't necessarily like.
We have time for one more question? One question, okay. So a question, actually, not a statement, please.
Yeah. Mine's an actual question. Hola, Ana. Actually, regarding the constraints, the time and budget constraint that you have in terms of in any project that lead you to eventually apply machine translation post-editing models, there is a concern regarding quality that has been that is now clearer than a few years ago, than we started applying this model globally. The poorer the output of the machine translation post-editing, because of those constraints, when a translator has time and budget to reason about the different choices, usually strive for the best quality. But when those constraints come into play, you need to be quick about it. So you might use the second best or the third best. After that, this output, this final output, which is ready to be delivered to the client, eventually becomes part of the reference corpus. Not only that the neural machine translation engines use as input to perfect the model. This is increasingly leading to impoverishing the input model in terms of we are using not the best choices. In generally speaking, we are talking about hundreds of millions of words being ingested by those engines on a monthly basis. So how does the strategy as the machine translation engine, data strategists tackle this issue? Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Hola, Carlos. What you're saying basically is that the final quality is getting lower and lower, so our machine translation quality is also getting lower and lower because of that, right?
Not necessarily lower, but simpler. So we are also reducing the amount of choices that we have been traditionally using, because if you have, you start from scratch and ask 10 translators to translate a paragraph, they will provide 10 different models. But these 10 different models would be widely different if you compare that to post-editing a single post and edited a single row machine translation output.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is that there are indeed use cases where this lexical variety or stylistic variety is not the first priority of the clients, but also this is an excellent opportunity for good translators to differentiate themselves on the market. So this is where you can bring value as a really good translator, and there will be always use cases for very stylistically varied translation, good translation, right? So it doesn't mean that everything will be post-edited using those machine translation engines that were trained with post-edited data. There will be always ways for you to differentiate yourself as a good translator. I think it's actually almost an advantage than a drawback.
Thank you. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions. There's tons of them on Slido, some very interesting ones as well. I would just like to ask you to join me in a round of applause for my panelists who have been great. Thank you very much for your inputs and for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Yota, and also to the panelists for your insights and expertise. And I think I have a sense that you'll need to carry on this debate outside in the coffee break. It's a short coffee break. Please be back here at 12:20. I also wanted to say that one of our